Allison, our chaotic kitten in Canada. Our chaotic kitten in Canada? My God.
Hi.
You just want us to stumble. That's not nice.
Chaotic kitten.
Okay, so
You can just call me Allison. It's okay.
that works. That's so much better. Allison, what do you want to talk about?
Oh, okay. First off, it's so glad to talk to you both. I've talked to V before, but I haven't talked to you before, Eric. So
Hi,
it's
Allison.
really nice to connect.
Yay. What do you want to chat about?
Well, I wanted to talk about specifically healthcare and pregnancy and reproductive rights and how it affects trans people, like especially trans men.
Okay.
Like I was researching recently about if there's any actual clinics that are designated to treating trans men while they're pregnant.
Okay.
And I couldn't find any.
Okay, so I am so ignorant on so many things in this area. Can I just pick your brain a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. So first off, I guess we should clear the air. Are we going to fundamentally disagree about something here?
I hope not.
Okay, good. Do you think that trans men deserve rights and deserve medical care? Okay.
Absolutely, they do.
So we don't need to argue about that.
100%.
Perfect. Is getting medical care, for pregnant trans men an issue? And if it is an issue, is it an issue in your country, in Canada, or in the United States, or what's the context here? Because I just don't have it.
There's no, it's not really well known. There's not many services available in general. And then people who debate abortion, they don't take into consideration the medical side of things. Like even cis women who have other medical issues, like say a blood clotting disorder, and the medication that you need to take to treat blood clots is a blood thinner called warfarin, and that affects pregnancy to the point where if you keep taking the warfarin during the pregnancy at all, it does create defects in the fetus. It harms the fetus a lot. So the next step is to treat the woman with the person, I'll call them people because
it's not just women.
Sorry, I'm kind of nervous here. Sorry.
No, that's okay, Allison. I think calling in about this is important, especially considering the fact that right now in the UK, they have completely shut down gender clinics. There are officially no people who specialize in certain attributes of gender confirming surgery. I believe that in the UK, there is nobody who is qualified to perform bottom surgery on trans men.
Really?
Yeah.
In the whole country?
In the whole country. It's huge, the onslaught against specifically, I want to say specifically trans men, but a lot of the time trans masculine people and trans men who need some kind of medical attention are kind of erased. They're not talked about as much, and so a lot of the facilities and the things that they need are kind of left by the wayside. And I think pregnancy centers and people who are specialized in working with trans men who are pregnant is such a big deal as well.
Wow. Jeez.
Exactly.
Holy crap.
I was reading an article on a trans man who was trying to get care at a pregnancy care clinic, and he called in, and the person on the phone was like, okay, well, we need the woman who's pregnant to talk to us and book an appointment. And he's like, no, you don't understand.
It's me. I am the person. Yeah,
I am pregnant. I need care. Yes, I identify as a man, and I say male for my gender, but I still have a uterus, and it has a fetus in it.
Yeah.
So
and it's a problem.
There's a bun in the oven.
And interestingly, and I love that we're talking about this, because one of the things that can really help get a point across to somebody, even if they're already logically there, is being around people who challenge you, right? Because here's the deal. I knew that trans men and transmasculine people had reproductive organs, right? And that was not something I pushed back on or like was credulous about. But at the same time, it didn't really hit me as much as when I joined a hysterectomy for non-binary and trans men group on Facebook, and was just, there are so many trans men and transmasculine people who are dealing with issues that historically, at least to most of the population, is primarily considered a women's health issue. And it just completely reframed my own perspective on it. And so, Allison, the fact that we can talk about this is important, because as a skeptic, it's one thing to say, oh, well, I take this concept with a grain of salt, or maybe I'm accepting of this thing that isn't very well known or isn't mainstream. And it's another thing entirely to actually synthesize that information and start to do something about it. You know, so it's one thing to say, oh, yes, of course, it's not just cis women. There are people of all kinds who can get pregnant. Sure. And that's great, but it takes another moment to sit down and actually interact with these issues and think about the implications to actually get from skeptic to humanist.
I'm amazed that I have so many questions. So is the existence of somebody using different pronouns, do the pronouns themselves causing somebody not to get the same kind of treatment they would get if they'd used other pronouns? That's it?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Some of it, yeah. So there are also pregnancy centers that are women only. So someone who identifies as a trans man would not have access to that facility because it's women only. And
so
is this like a TERF thing, like a weird TERF clinic thing?
No, because if you think about it, like there are plenty of trans men who pass, who can go stealth, who still would have this issue.
Yeah.
And so if you walk in and everyone would assume that you are a cis guy and you're not, you're going to get kicked out.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So if you just looked at the person behind the counter and said, hey, I got a uterus. Could we do like...
They would think you're trolling. They would think you're trolling.
They would think you're trolling.
Yeah. Which is so... One of the reasons that so many of these care centers are so up in arms is not just because of transphobia. It is partially. There is just the concept that they don't understand this yet. But also, these centers have been attacked by cis men many times. Like the concept of protesting outside Planned Parenthood, the bomber who was like targeting Planned Parenthoods, they have to be, you cannot get into some of these Planned Parenthoods in the city without being buzzed in through 3 doors because there is so much fear around somebody, usually a cis guy, walking in and
okay, but what about, I feel so ignorant. More questions. What about just like a pap smear? What if it's just like basic non-pregnancy related stuff? Would you be turned away from a clinic if you needed to get that as well?
Depending on the clinic, there's no protection for you. So if the nurse was not comfortable, sorry.
That's so weird. Okay, so let's bring this into action here. For people who are watching, for people who want to know, how do we get to a world that is going to make sure that people get their medical needs taken care of, regardless of the pronouns that they're using? What do we do? Where can we support it? How can we help? What do we look into? What's our call to action?
That's my question. That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, shit.
I really want to start really bringing awareness to this.
That is a great first step and a huge one, being able to bring awareness to and talk about these kinds of things and come with enough information to be able to push back against the inevitable backlash, right? And that, again, is where the street epistemology concept, where that ability to dialogue and interact that we practice every week on this show is so important, because it's fun when we're talking about, do ghosts exist? Or when we're talking about things that like, okay, are ghosts real? Cool, let's have this dialogue back and forth and actually, hone our skills, and it's fun. But when we're talking about something like this, where there's actually a lot of real lives at stake, all of those skills can be used to actually change minds and get your point across. And that's why, one of the reasons why it's so important to do this and to have these kinds of conversations. So awareness is one thing. Torben, who was on the show earlier, is going to be a trans doctor.
There are a couple in the chat.
Yeah, the more people we can get into healthcare who are trans or who are at least good allies is going to be probably the biggest change here. But before we can do that, we need to make sure that these people are not held back financially, right? There is a huge wealth gap between cis and trans people. There's a huge wealth gap. There's an inability to get jobs. There's an inability to be housed. Like, there are so many basic things that trans people need in order to be able to get to the point where they are stable enough to be able to go to medical school and change the system from the inside. So the first things that we need to be doing are not just talking about this issue, but also talking about the related issues that would allow us to fix this later on.
Okay, and from a larger perspective, are there any places that people can go to see if there's legislation in their area? Are there any organizations that are working to make sure that, hey, anywhere it says, a pregnant woman, that you just say pregnant person? Where can we go? Where can we look?
One good place to look, and I'm actually posting it in the chat, is American Atheists has this thing called the State Legislation Tracker. Mm-hmm. And it's super useful because you can go to your state and see all of the legislation that is being introduced, and they particularly point out things that go against that separation of church and state. And right now, as we've seen across the US, most of them are trans related. Most of them are an attack on trans people, as well as people who need reproductive health care, right? Those are interlinked, and those are both in the sights of the evangelical conservative kind of overreach. So a really good way to check out if there's something in your state, at least in the US, that's definitely a place to go. Internationally, Allison, I know you're in Canada. Is there anything in Canada that you'd like to shout out?
I haven't found any specific places that support trans, but I haven't really started looking all that much either. But a quick Google search showed me that there was, I think there's only 2 or 3 doctors in all of my province that actually does trans health and surgery, but that's only the surgery. That doesn't even include monitoring
Right.
reproductive health or STIs or any of that stuff.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I just want to do, I've got an idea.
What's your idea?
We have a blog.
We do have a blog.
And if
SkepticGenerationAnswers.com.
Yeah, if people are having trouble finding those links, then I think if we can compile a couple of those over the next few weeks, maybe we can put out a blog post that has those, even if it's just saying the same thing that's, 12 other places. If it makes it more available for people to be able to find those links, I think we could do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So here's what you do. Under the video, if you want to have a link that you found useful or you think might be helpful, drop it in the comments and we will review it and see if we can get it into that blog post.
That would be awesome. Let's crowdsource this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling in, Allison. This is a very important topic, and I know that it's a little bit out of what we normally talk about, but I think that it's important to kind of highlight a couple things. First, the conversations we have are prepping us to have the important ones that are going to impact other people's lives. So yes, it's fun and it's entertainment, but it's also super important. And two, the reason that so much of this is still an issue is because, Allison, both you and us, we live in predominantly religious
We're in the heart of Texas.
We're in the heart of Texas, which is, I can't think about too hard or else I will start spiraling.
I'm in Canada's Texas. So.
Canada's Texas.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important for a number of reasons. Thank you guys for listening to that. I know it was a little bit off of what we normally talk about, but no. This is our show. This is what we're deciding to make it. And when we decide that something needs to have attention put towards it, that's the great thing about us having our own show, is we get to do that. That is
Allison,
true.
Thank you so much for calling.
You're very welcome, V and Eric, and I look forward to talking to you both more about this kind of stuff. And we didn't even talk about the being non-binary and having to go through all of this, all of the women-oriented clinics, like being misgendered constantly and those kinds of things.
right. And that level of
It's all just so important.
Yeah, these are important conversations to have. Thank you so much for calling in, Allison.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day, and
Will do.
Good luck with your settling in.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're hoping to. Well, we'll take it afterwards. Take care.